Now for the bowl, you want the bowl to have a wider base. So center it a little lower and wider than you were, maybe the cylinders, lower and wider. And then, the base won't necessarily be this wide when I'm finished because I'll be grabbing some clay from the outside to pull it up. So now I'll open the bowl here, just like we did with the cylinders. I'm just going about halfway, and then I'll put my left fingers in here and go down. But now you have to remember to leave that thickness on the bottom, maybe a little, not quite a ½ inch, but a little less than a ½ inch. And then you can stop the wheel and check it with your pin tool. But you want to start with a curve. So see, I'm kind of going back and forth a little bit just so I get a nice curve in there. And then, let me just check this. And then, and you can, I'm going to let you make different shape of a bowl. You can make a taller, narrower bowl or a more open, wide bowl. And so I'm going to grab, now I can't make an undercut on the inside like we did the cylinders. So you have to kind of grab the clay from the outside a little bit and then start pulling up and then start squeezing after you pull up maybe a quarter of an inch or more, then start squeezing, because if you squeeze too soon, you'll mess up that curve. So now you want to start squeezing, and there's different ways to make bowls, but what I do is I usually pull it up kind of straight, but I let it flare out a little bit. So you can, when you were doing the cylinders, you were pushing in with your outside hand more to keep that narrow cylinder happening. So here, you don't have to do that necessarily. You can just squeeze equally, and then because the clay stretches when you squeeze it, it's just going to naturally go out. It's going to flare out. And I always just say, make kind of the shape of a terracotta planter. Not quite that tall, but so I'm squeezing equally, and see how it's just kind of flaring out. And then don't make the rim too thin. Keep the rim thick, because when you make this wider, it's going to get thin on its own when it stretches. And then also, you can thin it at the end of the whole process if it's a little bit too thick. But I see so many people that come up and they make the rim too thick, and then they can't put a design on it, and then it's too weak. And then if the rim's too thin, when you fire the bowl, it can warp, seriously. So that's one reason to have a thicker lip, I think. And then, okay, so now I have the height that I want. So there's a couple ways you could do this. One way is that you could just get keep your fingers together on both hands, put them against the bowl, and just push out and kind of widen that a little bit. That's one way you can do that. And then it's widening the rim, but you still have to go back and make this curve nice. So, and what makes a beautiful bowl is a sweeping curve from one rim to the other side of the bowl to the other rim. So that's what makes a really nice bowl if you have a beautiful curve. And so it can be a deeper curve or a more shallow curve. But there are different kinds of bowls that people can make. But I'd rather you not make a bowl with a flat bottom, because we're going to be trimming a foot, and if you do it with a flat bottom, it doesn't work so well. If you want to do a few extra bowls, if you have another shape in mind. And we're not going to make a set of bowls. I want you to practice different shapes. So, okay, now, so this, see, I want the curve to be a little more open, so I'm pushing out. Now I'm pushing with equal pressure, and then when you get to the top, if you don't want it to flare out, you might want to put a little more pressure on your outside hand to keep it from flaring out. So this kind of has a nice curve, but then it ends more vertically. I could open it up a little bit. This foot pedal keeps sliding away from me. Hold on. Okay. And then, okay, now you don't have to use this rib, but if you use a sponge, and some of you aren't throwing with a sponge, that's okay, but you might want to use a sponge to kind of make this curve nice and smooth on the inside. If you're using a bowl and putting a spoon in it, usually, if there's angles in the bowl, the spoon's going to kind of knock against the angles. It's not going to be as pleasant as if you have a really nice curve. So that's kind of a nice standard bowl. Maybe I won't do anything with this. I'm just going to see that it looks like the rim is a little bit thicker. The sides are thinner here. I'll come up and I'll stop here and kind of purposely make that rim a little bit thicker right there. And then, so I'll just make a typical kind of a round edge. And then if you want, I think I showed some of you maybe, you can get a piece of chamois, or you can cut a piece of plastic from your bag. But the only thing, if you cut a piece of plastic from your clay bag, don't lose it in your clay. Don't put it in the recycle bucket. So try to, you might want to put a piece of thread through it with a bead or something, just so you can identify, just so you can see it when you're cleaning up. But it's really easy to let this piece of plastic just sit here, and then when you're cleaning up, you grab it and throw them in the recycle bucket. So if we find any in the recycled clay, then I don't know where it came from. See, now I kind of pushed that a little more open, but see how the rim is getting smoother there? All right, so let me push this back in. All right, so that's one simple bowl. And then the rim a little bit, and it kind of makes the bowl look a little bit more fluid and not so formal. Oh, I didn't want to make that ridge in there. But I can show you, here, let me show you a couple things with this. You could make a groove. If you have this tool, you can, don't make a groove in it. What I meant was a ledge. Don't put this in and make a groove. Hold this kind of, so the whole thing is scraping against that top edge, and then put more pressure on the bottom, and it's making a little ledge. Then you could go up and do the same thing. And then when you glaze, if the glaze is going to run down and catch there and look really nice. So you can do that, or what I really wanted to show you was, I'm going to try to erase this. It's another way, it's a similar kind of thing, but I do this a lot, and I'm teased slowly, or no, I'm going to move this up. You could slow the wheel down and move that up more quickly, but so that kind of gives you a swirl in it instead of that line.
How long have you been throwing?
1/16 of an inch thick, the upper wall here. Because when you trim the bowl, you don't want to trim up here. You only want to trim probably the first third when it's upside down from the foot out. All right, so now, okay, there. And if you want, maybe on some of your bowls, you don't have to make a real smooth interior. You could let your finger marks show, if you don't mind it being rougher on the inside. Okay, so, all right, so I'm pushing this down a little bit more to make that wider. Okay, so now I will, you know what, I think I can pull more clay from the bottom and get that thinner. Okay, there. Yeah, it's making it a little bigger. No, that's better. And it is nice to try to use the clay that you have on the bottom so you don't have your bowl, you don't want you don't want your bowl to be a half an inch or an inch thick there, only right down at the base. So then there's less clay to trim off. In the lip here with this kind of a wide open groove. And then you don't want the sharp edges, so I'm going to just push the sponge kind of against them so they're not too sharp there. This is a little bit more of a decorative bowl. I have some bowls like this that I use at home, but I have to watch because if you bump them against something, they can chip here at the top. So maybe wet my finger, and then so you're going to push your outside finger kind of in that way. And you kind of fold. You could kind of fold your finger in as you push in, kind of move it up on the top. And so you can cut that in, and it's going to split that. I always forget this. Darn it. I want to flare it out. This looks nicer when the bowl flares out. Okay, let me go back, do that again. Okay, then push this down. All right, and then this is just simply called a split rim bowl. soften the edges a little bit with a sponge, and then push it closer together. I would push the inside one out closer to that, so there's a little gap there. And then maybe let me check this curve right here. Yeah, okay. You know, there is something that some potters do, and I don't do this so much, but they'll make a little swirl in the inside, maybe with a rib of their finger. They'll kind of do. Do you see that little swirl? It's just a little decorative element right there. And then the glaze will kind of accent that slightly. But I don't really do that because then that's another, put my finger on the inside and then push the needle tool in. Oops. 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. I don't know why I like to do 5.